Welcome, everybody, back to the Inner World podcast. We got so much pent-up gravy here. It's awesome that we're finally doing another show together, Dylan. Can't wait. We're talking about the Moseses, the many different faces of Moses. There is a lot here, and I think you put together your notes about half a year ago, and so maybe between the two of us, we're able to bring some serious gravy out of the portal, stuff that came from, before we took our hiatus, and stuff that I've dug up just in the last week working on this. And you are going to hear a crying baby in the background with me. That is unavoidable. So it's the beauty of life. How you doing, man?
Everything's going great. I'm excited. It's we haven't done this in a while, so gonna get the cobwebs out at first, and then get busy. But one of the reasons this is an important show for us is because we're breaking new ground that I don't think has ever been broken before. I've never seen anybody talk about this, and there's only one person that I've seen allude to it, which is Reverend Robert Taylor. But Reverend Robert Taylor didn't actually cite the sources and in terms of show you the actual Greek like we're going to. And so I think there's two major points that we're going to focus on today. And one of them is the way Moses is referred to in the plural and as a noun by Josephus, the earliest alleged Jewish scholar, even though his works are basically only from the 9th century AD, pretty much. So, and he wrote in Greek, ironically. And, there's a lot of stuff we're going to get into that's kind of, everybody likes controversy and conspiracy, not theory. This is the one to tune into.
Yeah, Dylan's got a lot of really deep technical breakdown drawn off of Robert Taylor's analysis and then expanding on it, chasing down Robert Taylor's leads like we've done with many other chapters from his book, Astronomico-Theological Lectures. If you're new around here or you forgot that we've been basically covering the majority of that work one phase at a time, and it's been extremely fruitful. So I'm glad we've made it to Moses, one of the most important characters in the entire canon of, the historical narrative, the mainstream narrative. What I've got on deck in my side of the notes are some closer looks at a few of the major parts of Moses' saga, and also the Astro-Theology of Moses. We're going to do some analysis of that, really digging into the connection that Moses has to the Nile and to rivers and to the concept of water, trying my best to bring the philosophical, deeper, nature truths out of this material and help people find the value in these scriptures outside of the attempted literalism, which does not really have much value at all unless you're one of these ruling archonic forces of the last several centuries that wants to trace their lineage and divine rulership right back to these kind of stories. And then I also have some, since we're looking at rivers a lot, how similar is Moses to Bacchus? Turns out really similar. Maybe you're not surprised if you've been around for a while with us, but there's a lot of gravy here. I think, honestly, I had to quit while I was right in the middle of this research. I could have probably pulled a whole nother show out of material on the connection to the muses, to the nymphs and water spirits, rivers and stuff in general. So, we may even continue this theme if we feel like it, looking more closely at the idea of muses and beyond just the, Disney movie Hercules gospel singing black ladies. There's a lot of good stuff today, and we'll probably have to skip some of our material just to fit in our time window. So what I did this time is, like Dylan always does, I have compiled my notes in a Substack article, which means people will be able to look at that and maybe follow along if they're watching at the same time, or review it later, word search different concepts in it, or find the material that we have to skip over in his article, my article. So the value of subscribing to both of us should be pretty clear, because we both bring different things to the equation. So anything else you want to bring in before I start on the beginning of my notes, buddy?
No, I was just going to welcome all the new people and welcome everybody back. And those of you who are paid subscribers, we appreciate you. And yeah, that is, for those of you who've never seen our work, the show notes, I mean, some of the feedback that I get, and I do have people that are subscribed to both of us, and they like how, a lot of these episodes, it'll take them a week or more to go through it thoroughly. So you have the nice ability to listen to us and kind of chill and enjoy the content. But for those of you who want to take matters into your own hands and fact check us or whatever it is, like follow up on your own, you can see everything that we did in the show notes and go from there. And that is where a lot of the value is. It's a great archive. And because the show notes are different for each of us, it makes sense. They're like each of us has different benefits to subscribing.
With topics this vast, even though you and I both do the best that we can to verify the things that we're claiming and find the precedent or the author or the thing from antiquity that is saying that or demonstrating that in an artifact, surely there's something in each of our articles where we did not achieve that level of precision and double checking. It's so much, right? So that's what I love the audience for, because they do chase down the leads. They follow our work. And sometimes when there's something that we just have to leave hanging because we can't get to it, they might go find the evidence for us and share it. So I love that.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for us to reach somebody who is like a fluent, like ancient Greek scholar that isn't compromised, that actually understands our argument. Because I think the challenge with us is you can find extremely learned people that you can have these conversations with, but they don't understand it from the perspective or the framework because they've never addressed our work or looked into it. So they don't understand where we're coming from. And an example of this is I've talked to two people about what we're going to go into, because I want to make sure, we're not suffering from Dunning-Kruger here, right? So the initial expert that we're taking from is going to be Reverend Robert Taylor, obviously a learned man from Britain, right? But in examining the Greek, I contacted people that are Greek and got their take on it. And they're like, we've never seen this before. This is totally alien. And then I've also touched upon this subject with someone who is a bit of a Greek scholar from the status quo perspective. And they just hand wave dismiss it like, well, it has to be like that. There's got to be an article and there's got to be a termination. So that's why. But they don't account for, so they have no idea about the Muses or any of the things we're going to go into, or the Astro-Theology or the mythology, any of that stuff. So for them, it's just like it has to be. For them, they still accept the status quo, like when we broach the subject of Jesus being called Kyrios or Kyros or Kyron or Kyrio. So you see that and they're like, well, he has to be called that. And it's like, well, no, he doesn't have to be. That's what they called the sun in Persia. And you do not find any allusion to said other figure in the 1st century AD. All you find is the Persian name for the sun, according to these Greek writers that we depend on for history, such as Plutarch, such as Strabo, these people who are around and works are allegedly from the turn of the millennium. So there's a lot of interesting things we're going to get into, but to make a long story short, we are very eager to get somebody who has gone through our work, who has these technical skills that we don't, because we can only look at so much, and there's only so much you can do without having a certain level of knowledge. Fortunately, we're able to read Hebrew and Greek a little bit and then translate it ourselves, whatever. But that's nothing compared to somebody who's like an actual scholar and has spent, an inordinate amount of time learning this stuff for themselves to the point where they're fluent, and can answer concerns more easily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. The thing is that the claim has to be proven by the person making the claim, right? Like, we don't have to believe the claim that Moses was a real person just because he's in a book or in a lot of people's minds in the academic mainstream. It's considered to be something that has a reality to it. In one of the profoundly synchronistic twists of language, the word mosaic refers to an ancient form of art. And the status quo view of ancient history, we could also call mosaic. Obviously, the first mosaic I'm talking about is an art medium where images are composed of many small single-colored tiles arranged like puzzle pieces to create the big picture. In the same way, in my opinion, the mosaic history is a selective assortment of fragments that are arranged just so to fabricate a particular narrative framework and leaving out other pieces. So what we do together, Dylan and I, and individually, we discuss the multitude of problems with the assertions of these academics and historians and religious scholars who have constructed our worldview of ancient history out of misguided or deceitful selective arrangement of evidence, often intended to justify institutional powers and religious dogma by alleging to discover proofs that biblical history can be archaeologically mapped to demonstrate that religious mythology is in fact based on real historical people and events. So the narrative framework for antiquity, we call it mosaic all the time because it's based on the notion that the Pentateuch, also known as the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, were in fact written by one of the most famous characters in these books. Hence, they're being referred to as the books of Moses. Never mind the impossibility of an author writing the story of his own death and his secret burial site. But I joke, maybe it's a Bilbo and Frodo situation where somebody takes up Moses' quill and finishes those last few lines for him. I guess we'll never know. But it says actually in Deuteronomy 34, verses 5 and 6. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And so that right there, you should be wondering, what does that mean, according to the word of the Lord? What is the word of the Lord? That is the star story. That is the scripture in the sky. The Lord is the whole sky. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab over against Beth Peor, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. Translation's a tricky thing. We'll never know if, and he buried him, as it is written in Deuteronomy 34:6, meant Moses buried himself, or if Yova took the time out of his busy schedule to come down and throw some dirt on the homie. Don't know. But that's what it says. So for the sake of our investigation and to keep the subject matter of this episode pretty focused, we'll proceed through a lot of the major parts of Moses' biography in my side of the notes as told by scripture. I'm not going to get to all of these, but the important beats of the story for review, for those of you who maybe didn't have Sunday school as a kid: Moses' birth, concealment in an ark, and discovery in the water, his conflict with an Egyptian and flight to the land of Midian, the encounter with Jove as a burning bush, the exodus of the Hebrews culminating in the miraculous parting of the Red Sea, wandering in the wilderness for 40 years to receive manna from heaven to sustain them. Moses draws water from a rock, happens twice. He raises the brazen serpent. He battles many factions, including the Amalekites, yes, on the plain of Rephidim. And he also receives the transmission of the 10 Commandments. So we're going to consider a few of these narrative chapters really closely. It's worthwhile to have multiple symbolic perspectives in mind. The interpretations don't have to be mutually exclusive. We're dealing with priestcraft here, but this is an anagogical or multifaceted, multidimensional layers of meaning here. So first we're going to look at the Robert Taylor analysis. Dylan goes really hard on that, making Moses a personification of the Nile or life-giving water. Taylor makes Moses an allegory for the divinity of the water element. And I think that reading will be very profitable to connect to other watery deities, especially Bacchus and Oceanus. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time considering the relationship between Moses and Muses. I appreciate, I couldn't get as much of this stuff put in as I wanted to, but I want to throw this out at the beginning because it's one of my favorite weaves to always have on the perspective framework. Inspired by Godfrey Higgins' massive works to attempt threading the overarching theory that he called the Neros cycle, or the cyclical patterns of time epochs, and that might be the original and universal concept from which the various myths and religions are generated, or somehow the framework that relates them all. In reading, a muse, or a memshenhe, or messiah, is the presiding genius of an age, according to Higgins, bringing one to a close and ushering the world into the next. The messianic children of God are recognizable by several symbolic similarities they share across cultures and eras. Higgins postulated that the number of muses, such as having 9 muses, might correspond to the number of world ages that had thus far transpired according to the system. I don't think he was able to fully support the idea, but I don't think it means he was wrong either. And then thirdly, we're going to do the most, what I think is the most convincing interpretation of the Moses story is the astro-theological perspective, where Moses and his supporting cast of characters are derived from the constellations, planets, the sun, and its journey through the zodiac. I will be borrowing some of the extensive legwork done by David Warner Matheson to help with that case. And along the way, we're going to consider how the evidence from all 3 perspectives lends itself to the identity of Moses being syncretic to many other heroic lawgivers, sons of God, etc., from other cultures. So that's kind of the introduction. What do you got, Dylan?
Well, I think you deserve a standing ovation for the first part of that. You should definitely save for your own book someday. And also, one of the technical things why these podcasts are special and why our show notes are special is you can just say that Godfrey Higgins quote and that Muse and Moses, etc., being the same. But what we do here is we actually show you philologically why they are the same. Whereas if you were just to be a casual reader and come across that, it wouldn't make sense. But if you actually look at it, especially because in Old Synagogue Hebrew, they don't use the samek, they just use the shin for S. Moshe, Moses, is literally MSE, which if you take away the vowel of that O or U that is interchangeable with muse, it is the same word, MSE. And so this is what we do to help you increase your own awareness of what you're looking at so you can see it in different languages and not be tripped up over why it looks different in one language versus the other. And you get this amazing perspective where a whole new layer of understanding and vision opens up once you know this system.
Let's get into the first section of your notes, man. I want to make sure that we're just kind of bouncing between each other's parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I would like to start with is that quote from William Betham. This has been something that everything my work has hinged upon, because when you actually look at what a Phoenician is, where they come from, it's all from a Greek account of a people that they didn't really know about. And it's a word that only makes sense from an Etruscan perspective, because the root of it in Etrusco-Umbrian is puni, which is purple, which is what begets the Latin pony, their word for Phoenician. And it's quite, if you look at the accounts in the historical record that are available from people like Roman senators and poets, Caelius Italicus, he says the first people to adorn themselves in that Syrian purple, their robes, are the Vetulonians, which is a city-state of Etruria. So something to consider in the back of your mind, is that this idea of the Hebrew system and all this stuff coming from the Orient is most likely an inversion, which is why the Hebrew has way more alphabets. All these cultures pretending to be older have way more letters in their alphabets. They have more letters in their alphabets than the early Italian Celtic peoples. Whence I believe this system depends.
Yeah, so alphabets don't lose letters, they gain them, generally speaking.
Yeah. And so for this, I want to read this for those who are just listening. This is from William Betham. he wrote, "It has been said that this language, Phoenician, was Hebrew or had a strong affinity to it, but the best Hebraists have tested it without success, for the results have not enlightened the world. The Celto-Etruscan has not only an affinity, but its similarity is almost universally applicable to every Phoenician and Etruscan inscription to which it has been applied." And if you want to read his work, he's great at breaking down some of these words from a Celtic Irish perspective, ancient Irish perspective. And in my book, The Universal Empire, I went through the work of two scholars, Colonel Valency and this other Italian gentleman from the 1700s, who salvaged the remaining bit of the Punic left in Malta. And Valency went through that and said, look at all these Punic words and then look at all these pure Irish words. And they're cognate, they look the same, they sound similar, and they mean the same. And it is so comprehensive to make it virtually impossible that the ancient Irish are not descended from the Sicilian Phoenicians, which is where the Punic is thought to originate. So you have this Italian origin in a lot of this stuff, and that's important to the grand scheme of my work. But I just wanted to lead that off because it's important that our viewers know that Hebrew and Phoenician have nothing to do with each other, what is allegedly Phoenician. So you want to kick it off by reading Robert Taylor right under that and get us going? Or would you like me to?
Robert Taylor wrote, I am now to introduce you to the critical study of the second of the sacred books, which bears in our English Bibles the title, The Second Book of Moses, called Exodus. This book is in the Latin Vulgate of Pope Sixtus V and Pope Clement VIII, called merely Liber Exodus, that is, the Book of Exodus, without any mention of the name Moses. In the Greek Septuagint, it is called only Exodus. In the Hebrew, it is called merely Vav, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, and then we have Shin, Mem, Vav, Tav. So it's like Yule Smoot. Yule Smut.
Yeah, and the V and the B, it's a tricky situation because you have the V and the B are the same letter, but in this case it's a Vav. So it's like, is it a Yule? Yeah,
could be
Yule,
Baal,
which is interesting though. Yeah, and or if you remove that L like Ilios or what was I gonna say? Yule, like Julius, or the Yule, like the Yuletide. Something to think about.
Taylor transliterates it as Vel Samath. That is, and these are the names of the sons of Israel, which is nothing more than the first words of the book itself, written a little larger than the rest to mark the place of beginning, but being no title at all. So that there is no authority whatever to show who the author of the book was. It really is anonymous, and our English translators, in taking upon themselves to call it the Book of Moses, have committed an impertinence and taken a liberty which they had no right to take, for which they had no authority of any Latin, Greek, or Hebrew original. They have added to the words of this book, and therefore have shown how little respect they had for that fearful denunciation of the apostle, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. All right, you take the next couple.
If they found the book without a title, why did they not leave it so? Why presume to give it a title and to assign it to an author of their own mere conjecture and guess, in which, indeed, they have guessed so ill and conjectured so widely off the mark as to expose our English translation to the scorn and ridicule of illiterate and uninformed infidels, where certainly the divine original itself would have stood unimpeached and is indeed absolutely unimpeachable. The silly and malapert objections of our infidel and skeptical writers, and the still more silly and absurd answers of our Christian advocates to those objections, as that Moses has drawn his own character, has called himself the meekest of men, and has described his own death and funeral in these books, and therefore could not possibly have been their author, are dissipated in a moment before the merits of that simple but certainly first to be answered challenge. Where was it ever pretended that Moses was the author of these books? Or what should render them of less authority, had they been written by the prophet Samuel, or the priest Hilkiah, or by any other holy and inspired personages? Now, something that I broached in my Spirit World series was that Godfrey Higgins observed that the book of Ecclesiasticus, or the wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach, is corrupted and dislocated. The translation is found in the Vulgate, but it's not known who made it. And Calmet noticed the translator used obsolete words that prove the translation is much older than the Christian era. You can check the show notes for that example. You want to go down where Taylor continued? Do you want to start that off, or do you want me to keep going?
No, let's just give the example. Give the examples from Holy Sailors there.
For riches, honestus for a rich man, respectus or visitatio for the punishment of God on wicked men, supervacuitas for the vanity or vainglory, animalia supervacua for dangerous or noxious animals. And these are all terms that cease to be common vernacular prior to the turn of the millennium. So if the Vulgate is younger than the Hebrew or Greek Bibles, well, they wouldn't be using those words that are already archaic by the time it was published, which means if it is a younger document, it's being, I don't want to say plagiarized, but something is being taken from a much older idea or manuscript. That's what I think the conclusion would be.
Taylor continued, there is no evidence that these 5 books, commonly called the Pentateuch, were written by any person who bore the name of Moses. The books themselves assert no such thing, and we have no right to assert it for them. There is, however, authority which might, to those who jump at conclusions, make it for a moment seem that the person mentioned in the book of Exodus, under the name Moses, was their writer. And that is where our Savior says to the Jews, if ye had believed Moses, ye would have believed me, for he wrote of me. And that answer of Philip to Nathanael, we have found him of whom Moses did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. But, sirs, the day itself is not more apparent than the fact that, if that were the case, these writings could not possibly be the writings of Moses, since in no part of them is there the least allusion to Jesus of Nazareth, and the only sons of Joseph mentioned in these books are the 2 heads of the tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh.
This is some real whoa buddy shit right now.
You have to hit that in the show notes for the subscribers. It's so funny. That's one of my favorite podcasters. They just like make fun of like all like the grifters. Whoa, buddy. This is some whoa, buddy shit right now.
Continuing, Taylor says, there is no evidence then that these books were written by any person of the name of Moses. And though Josephus, Philo, Manetho, Diodorus, Orpheus, Strabo, Longinus, and other exceedingly ancient authors have spoken of writings ascribed to Moses, or rather, more correctly speaking, to the Moses, for the word is plural, and evidently signifies more than one. There is no reason to suppose that by the Moses they meant any particular person, nor do the books of the Moses, in the language of those ancient authors, mean anything more than the books according to the Moses, as our 4 Gospels, which I hope are of quite as good authority as the books of the Moses, are called Gospels, not by or of, but according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
So, calling him the Moseses it's like me calling chance, if I'm writing about chance, the chances. It changes the context. And I don't see how people can't see that. In my opinion, for me, it's clear as day. But it's very important to recall that Judea didn't have historians. There are no original manuscripts of Flavius Josephus's work prior to the 11th century. Some people say there's like 9th and 10th century stuff in there. The oldest surviving manuscripts are Greek minuscules copied by Christian monks. So copies of alleged copies for over 1,000, basically 1,000 years. That's what you're dependent on. A Greek minuscule is a specific style of Greek handwriting that was developed as a book hand in Byzantine manuscripts during the 9th and 10th centuries. So, in my opinion, this is especially damning because if the following issues and conclusions that we're about to make here are correct, and that have been made by legendary people like Robert Taylor, this is it implicates the possibility that the story of Moses was forged at an even later chronological time than the first Greek writer to mention him, which was allegedly not till the 3rd century AD. And the reason that is significant is because so much of our history is dependent on these Greek writers, which they may not have even existed at the time they're suggested. They may be forgeries that were created by an institution such as the church, such as the capital of Rome being moved to Constantinople, that type of stuff. And so the reason I've looked into this is because when you study the ancient Italian languages, which are more sophisticated cultures and older cultures, in my opinion, because you still can't translate their languages because they're alien to the rest of the world and don't have affinity to Indo-European and all this other nonsense, there is no writings of these characters. These stories don't exist. Some of them do, some of the older like mythological ones, but these Abrahamic stories don't exist, which in my opinion is an evidence of their youth. But I do want to be transparent because regarding the works of Josephus, I was looking through the manual. As far as I could tell through like a periphery, like word find search using Greek, it only occurs once where Moses is referred to as the Moseses. And it, in my opinion though, things get complicated because I can't find this in other manuscripts. So either it hasn't been scanned in properly or the system, like when I try to do peripheral searches, it's been scrubbed. Whatever is going on, I'm not sure, but it's such an obscure subject that nobody but Robert Taylor, maybe somebody else, maybe a couple other people have addressed it, and then us. Like this, as far as the modern era is concerned, we are the tip of the spear broaching the subject. Unless somebody can, provide evidence. Otherwise, feel free to do that. We will give them credit. But when you look at this word, Chance, if you could just scroll down and show that, like both of those. So that's like for those who pay for our show notes, and this is all in the free portion anyway, you can go click that source button. It'll link you to the page itself so you can see it. But you'll see that termination of the word, it's IOIS in Greek. And right before it,
not to mention the spelling has an omega and an upsilon before the sigma, so it's MOUS. A lot closer to like mooses or muses than mo.
or
it would just
Y.
If it was mo, it would just be an omega.
Yep, it could be Moises though. It could. There's who knows what the hell it is, but yeah, that's the point. Is it's not as it could be a Greek transposition of Moshe, And
I hear the special boy going, but in the Old Testament, it's written as Mem Shin Hey. So this is irrelevant because, to give any other like muse connotation to it is irrelevant because what is actually in the Old Testament is Mem Shin Hey, right? Not whatever this is. But this is a allegedly Jewish historian who's writing it this way, I'll point out. So who would know if not him?
And there it is. You know, it's one of those things we can kind of put people in checkmate with. But if you'll see, it's in the line right above Moses's. You'll see T-O-I-S. That means the. So it's literally tis Mouses or Moises, which is the Moseses. And so I did some digging on this. That termination, for anybody who's interested, you can just copy and paste the I-O-I-S in Greek. It's in my notes. And it's not a common Greek termination. And I can't get a decent search return on it regarding terminations or grammar. There's very little on the internet right now talking about it. And generally, when you see words that end in OI in Greek, they indicate plurality. But if you look at Mouses or Moises, if the S is struck from the end of the word, it would still be the Moseses because the modern way is plural, OI, right? So it would be Mosi. But if that's a mistake, and it's a big if, as I say in my notes, then that termination is similar to French. And it makes me wonder if these documents are somehow fabricated by somebody from a French portion of this institution during those like Middle Ages.
Well, that would be a time period where like Avignon was rivaling Rome for centuries, to which would be the supreme seat of the Holy Roman Empire, right? So maybe there is something to that, because when you put it that way, I hadn't thought about this till you started discussing it. Just when I was reading your notes, I didn't make that connection, but it's like, it's almost like they put the pluralization on the word twice. Yeah. It's
odd, and Greek people don't understand it, or at least they don't. It's unfamiliar to the Greeks that I broached the subject with, and the people who do understand like ancient Greek and are more from a religious scholar, they dismiss it as like, well, it just has to be something. It could be anything. You just had to have something, you know. So it's a little weird. But if you want to scroll down,
I'll also add, you know, the further back you go to the writings of church fathers, the further before it is that there's a printing press and more people become literate, the more the more loose they are with just outright associating biblical characters with other mythological figures to the point where I have some of that in my notes that is extremely mind-blowing from the modern dogmatic perspective. But, you know, anyway, my point being, like, if this was a fabrication of a Middle Ages French monk or something, or bishop or church father writer, and he's calling Moses the Muses, you know, it's actually kind of common for them to do stuff like that. And they reveal things because they think they're just writing to each other. You know, they don't understand that in a few centuries there's going to be a printing press and literacy is going to take off. And then someday there's going to be guys like me and you going, what the hell is this?
And the conclusions that we have, like whether we're wrong or right, it's still it doesn't really matter. Well, first of all, we're right, at least in the analysis portion. Our conclusions might not be correct. And that's why we're kind of being loose with them and just giving other options. But this is revelatory either way, because it either proves what we're talking about is our conclusions are correct, or it proves what you just mentioned, which is controversial and just as revelatory and should make ripples. You know, people should be talking about this and arguing with each other as to why this is. And in that argument, I want to add something else that I just came across. I published an article recently regarding Semiramis. And if you scroll down a little bit further, you'll see two more Greek examples. Keep going. And right there. Now, what you have there, the way I found this was doing returns on Semiramis in Greek. And I just happened to be reading this totally irrelevant passage to this episode that we did. And then I just see, well, what's that? Looky there. Hassiri. That's Assyrians, and it's plural. And look, it's pluralized by a different author from the Chronicon Paschal, and it's terminated with IOIS. for plurality. So
double plural again.
It supports this yet again. So if Moses was, now there's the claim that many scholars have made, and so I don't know that I ever chased this down or how they came to this, and it's something that if I cared about enough, I would probably, focus on it, but someone else can do this. In my early work, I trusted people a lot more because if I found out the majority of what they said could be fact checked, stuff like this I might not chase down. In light of the fact that Egyptian, they have no alphabet prior to the Coptic, and the Coptic is Greek based. Once you learn that and all the hieroglyphics are Greek based, you see how young their bullshit system is that they've tried to superimpose on possibly ancient structures and make it seem like they were the creators of them. Once you get past all that, I don't know how you would corroborate the fact that Moses was a term for an initiate in Egypt as purported, unless it was a Greek term. And it's kind of looking at it from maybe not a Hebrew or a Jewish perspective. I don't know. But a lot of scholars have alluded to the fact that Moses meant initiate. So the term pluralized would be the initiates. The Moseses would be the initiates. And, that's something to be cognizant of. I don't know if we need to broach this next subject. I think we could leave that in the show notes. It's just me giving more examples. So we can scroll down to, let's see. Oh, so in Taylor's work, he referenced Philo, also writing Moses, plural. Philo's work is a little bit harder to find in its original form, especially in the Greek. And the very little that I have, it's not actually like an original source. And this book was like 6,000 pages. I couldn't get returns on it. So I don't know if it's in there as this. So, and I couldn't find the original manuscript of Manetho's work in Greek. So there's a lot of this that people may have had access to hundreds of years ago that we just don't have anymore, or they're just not in public eye, or they just haven't been scanned, whatever it is. The challenge for a lot of this stuff is that there are a lot of things in the archaeological record that are in private collections that will never be public and the public will never have access to. And they're just kept by wealthy people.
And a clergyman like Robert Taylor might have been able to see before it went under lock and key.
Yeah, or if it was in the Vatican Museum or something, if certain people can get permission to go and explore that stuff. So it's hard to tell, but it's been a big problem for learning ancient Italian history, because there's certain books that I've read that are written by archaeologists, and the artifacts they show in their books, they're incredible, and you can't find them on the internet because they've just never been published. What we're dealing with is a very obscure subject, but hopefully it will become, somebody will look at this someday. And
the internet is a lot skimpier than people realize. There's a lot on the internet, and it's mostly cat videos and pornos. There's like, in terms of the archaeological record and things that we would be interested in subject matter for this show, it gets harder to find stuff, not easier. Things get more restricted over the course of years that we've been doing this kind of stuff. So you have to really save images of a statue or a piece of art or jewelry that you find that has importance. You got to keep the PDFs of old books offline. I went to go click on one of the source links and archive.org is not available today. So it's like, this stuff is not guaranteed. We have a lot of advantages with the internet, but it's not the perfect thing that it might seem like for those of you who don't try to dig this stuff up yourself. And those that do, let's put you on a scavenger hunt. Find in Philo or Manetho the Moseses. If you find that will be monumental, because if it was more than just Josephus, that is a big deal.
Yeah, and to your point, it's like the other issue is that with the advent of podcasts and stuff, people now are more inclined to just talk and listen. They're not inclined to demonstrate. So sometimes they will be saying the right thing, but they themselves don't have the skills or resources to demonstrate their claims. And we try to do that here so that everybody can see where we're getting it from, where it is in the historical record, et cetera, et cetera. You want to continue with Moses being the 9 muses?
Let's hold that. That's going to be really juicy. But I want to start talking about the beginning of Moses' story, the birth and concealment in an ark. Because this is the biggest deal to me about his whole story. The book of Exodus commences with the death of Joseph and all his generational cohort, establishing that the children of Israel, who we know as Chronos, or time, brought forth fruit and increased in abundance. This is Exodus chapter 1. Thus the Hebrews became numerous. Exodus 1:8 says, "Then there rose up a new king in Egypt who knew not Joseph." My buddy David Matheson points out rightly that this detail is inconsistent with a literal interpretation of the story, because allegedly Egypt was quite sophisticated in its record keeping. Joseph was the savior of the entire land of Egypt in the preceding story. Matheson's take is the not knowing Joseph would be the text hinting that the constellations which represented characters in the book of Genesis, now that we're in Exodus, they must each now be considered with new narrative representations. I like that take, but I more enjoy the point about that it's a not a good detail to consider it a literal story, that they would forget somebody as miraculous as Joseph. That makes no sense.
Well, especially because when you look at the meaning of Exodus, it's referring to a coming out. And when you say a coming out of Egypt, Egypt is darkness below the horizon. So it's an allegory for stars coming out, or Jews fleeing Egypt, coming out from rising.
The children of Israel.
As the night, yeah.
That's the children of Chronos. The scripture goes on to say that the king of Egypt was concerned with the rapid increase in population of the children of Israel, and so commanded the midwives of the Hebrews to slay all the male babies as soon as they were born. Have we heard that before? That sounds familiar. This is the situation where Moses' story begins. This is what he's born into. He is protected by this fate by his mother, who hides him in a reed basket. Literally, the word is tav bet tav. That is the same word as the ark in Genesis, is Noah's ark.
And that is also the root of what's possibly Thebes.
100%. Yeah.
You'll see bull symbolism laid up. Dude.
Where's Bacchus?
Hold on, Chance. I got to tell you this.
Bacchus is from Thebes. TBT.
Oh my God, dude. Something that our audience needs to revisit. I don't even think you and I realize how important this episode was, but episode 3 of Inner World, the Age of Towers, and it's like a play on Taurus.
So good.
That has come back to like haunt everything for eternity. I don't think I don't think anybody understands how significant that episode was, but every time we do this, I constantly refer to that. I'm like, oh my God, dude, that was a megalithic episode.
I got to go rewatch that. All right. Oh, well, that's what I love about this is it is timeless, eternal goodness what we make here, right? Doesn't matter how often we manage to do it. It doesn't, it never gets old. You can come back to it. You'll hear something new every time. So the cross-cultural messianic archetype of the persecuted child is a very big motif in world of mythology. I'm just going to give you some of the greatest hits. Matthew chapter 2, verse 16. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. So the Gospel of Matthew is telling you the same story. The newborn Jesus escapes the mass infanticide campaign of a tyrant because Mary and Joseph are warned by an angel that it's going to happen. Dylan, where do they flee to? Ding, ding, ding. It's Egypt. You're muted. Sorry, bud.
Sorry, I was reading something about Babylon in the Greek and I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, well, Jesus as a baby escapes being murdered and he flees. His parents take him to Egypt. Whoa. Interesting. Then you have in the Bhagavata Purana, here's a picture for it. The evil king Kamsa receives warning that Devaki's 8th child will grow up to overthrow and kill him, so he imprisons Devaki and slays her babies as they are born. But baby Krishna is smuggled across the Yamuna River and raised in hiding by foster parents. In the majority of the artistic depictions of the river crossing, he's in a basket. So, and that's like across the board, whether that's exact in the scripture or not, but I found a million pictures like this.
I also want to bring, I don't remember if we have this in the show notes. So if we don't, I apologize if we're going to repeat this, but it's also important because I was stuck on reading that thing in Greek about Babylon. It's critical actually. If you're going to use the Bible as a historical reference, to recognize that Rome is called Babylon. So this idea that all this is originating in Babylon may very well be correct if you recognize that Rome is Babylon. And when you know, so this is just something to be aware of. 1 Peter 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So more attempted infanticide is not exactly included in the Avesta, the Zoroastrian scriptures, but in the many centuries of extra scriptural writing and epic poetry by Persian Zoroastrian poets and religious authors, there are a bunch of accounts where the baby Zoroaster or Zarathustra is attacked by demons or other evil forces as a baby and miraculously preserved. Then you got the Osiris-Horus cycle. In many texts, be they real or authentically as old as they're supposed to be, they have the detail of Seth attempting to murder his nephew, the infant Horus, after Osiris's death. Isis hides Horus in the marshes of the Nile, concealed via a river, smuggled via a river, the exact same river as Moses. And similar to Zoroaster, Horus is attacked by evil creatures, but survives by divine intervention. Another really good one is Perseus, son of Zeus. He has a similar superhero origin story. He's got King Acrisius, just like Pharaoh, Herod, and Kamsa, hearing a prophecy that a descendant will end his reign. He attempts to prevent the child's birth by imprisoning Perseus' mother, Danae. Zeus knocks her up anyway. He becomes a golden light that gets in through the window. Acrisius didn't want to get his hands too dirty, so he lets Poseidon kill them by throwing them out to sea in a wooden chest. It's a box. It's box-shaped. It's very significant, just like the Ark. It's the same kind of shape. It fulfills the universal motif, Noah's Ark, the box and an ark and a chest. So he's thrown out literally in like a chest. Another layer to the symbolism is that Acrisius rules Argos, which is the same name as the legendary ship of the Ark. You know, philologically G, interchanging with C, CHK, the Ark. There's actually more. I'll just give a quick honorable mention list. Romulus and Remus survive an attempted drowning in the sacred river of their region. Baby Oedipus is left exposed to avoid the fulfillment of an oracle's prophecy. Comes back and kills his dad anyway. Karna in the Mahabharata is a son of Surya, the sun, and is abandoned after birth and set adrift in a basket on a river. And noticing that name is worthwhile too, because it's Karna, K-R-N, right there. Then Sargon of Akkad, allegedly the Mesopotamian king, set adrift in a reed basket on a river, rescued, fostered, and then rose from those humble origins to found the world's biggest empire, allegedly, up to that point. Or what about Zeus? Zeus is hidden to avoid being killed as an infant by Kronos. So right away, the very first event in Moses' story, we already have a preponderance of evidently coincidental happenstancery that suggests Moses was indeed a mythical character who fulfills a universal Messiah archetype, in no way a historical figure, unless the devil, of course, was the one that went around and put those other stories in people's heads so they'd be confused about who the real savior was. So Did the devil put the Moses story in to confuse people about Jesus, or is it the other way around? Which one's the real one that survives the infanticide and goes to Egypt? I don't know.
It's a convenient when you start looking at the power of these scriptures and the way that they can be explained away. It's a convenient excuse, right? Well, your problem is you're reading the work of the devil and you've been led astray. Now come back into my fold and give me all your money, please.
The devil went around before Jesus was born and gave a bunch of people made up stories and legends that sounded a lot like Jesus to confuse you specifically.
Isn't it wild? Like, isn't it wild how all these stories and like allegedly taking place in these superstitious cultures, they're leaving everything up to fate by not just killing the thing, the child. You know what I mean? Like I have a hard time even saying that because it's such a grotesque idea to me. So that's why I said thing. I'm like trying to like broach a subject without saying it because I don't want that in my space. But if you really were afraid of fate and a destined child, you wouldn't then put the destined child in an ark or whatever and leave it to fate to survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you were smart, you would set that child up with a really kick-ass life somewhere far away that they would never want to leave. Something like that.
Or just get rid of it. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying.
No, that's bad vibes, though.
That's the dark truth. They say everybody did child sacrifice back then, which is, in my opinion, nonsense. I don't believe that because these are things that they're based on like, we find ashes at this site. Well, what's to say that, infant mortality is a big deal. I mean, look at infant mortality all the way up to the 1800s. It's crazy how few people live to make it to like adulthood. When you look at a group of like, it's like 40% of people die in adolescence back then. So when you look in the ancient world, it's probably even worse. And it's like, maybe it's just it's a part of life back then. And I don't know. I'm just saying these stories don't add up to me because it makes no sense. Just get rid of it. If you're worried about some child growing up, you know what I mean? You wouldn't just like set it off to then come back and conquer you. If you believed in the gods and all that stuff. That's why I think this stuff is inconsistent.
It's great as a myth, though.
Yeah. Well, that's where its power is. If you're not taking it as literal history, it's an allegory, and that's fine.
So that's where I'm at for the free part of our talk, which ended up being huge.
Yeah, it's a nice, big, hearty welcome back. Thank you to our subscribers for sticking with us during the hiatus. We appreciate you. Every little bit does help. Like the more our respective platforms supplement our income, the more space we have in our lives to do this more frequently. And we appreciate everybody that's been here, and to all the new people, welcome. And hopefully you'll subscribe. And for those of you who've never been subscribed to Substack, whether it's me or Chance, the platform itself gives you a free 7-day trial to like anyone you want. So you can just get a free 7-day trial and go through everything you want to see if it's worth your time to actually upgrade to a full membership. So
yeah, now that I'm here,
risk-free.
Although more of my catalog is on Patreon than on Substack, I'm trying to catch it up as I can, but I prefer Substack immediately. It's just, I like the functionality better. And the community aspect of Substack is also pretty sweet. It's a lot easier to stumble on cool stuff, and the overall vibe of Substack is pretty sweet. Unlike other social media, it's like a higher intellect threshold for the most part.
And we could do a live stream with anyone we wanted. Like we could do a hangout through the app, and it'll go to, if we want to attract newer people who are just on Substack, the app. So if you want to do that sometime, if you ever want to do a hangout, get, George is on there. So you could get, there's people that are on there.
Yeah.
Topher's on there. A lot of people are on there that we could do live streams and hang out, just, bullshit about whatever we want just to attract new people. There's a lot of options here.
Yeah, I've had a blast though, and we will give you a little better teaser of what's in part 2 after Dylan and I conclude here. I'll construct that, and stoked to be here again, man. Thanks again. Awesome. Thanks everyone for being here.
Appreciate you.
If you've enjoyed this wade into the river of gods in the first hour with me and Dylan, the second half will take you much farther out to sea. Stick around for a moment for a glimpse of what waits in the deep end. In part 2, we continue our salvage operation on the submerged architecture of the Mosaic mythos, as we demonstrate Greek parallels, water gods, ancient builders, and linguistic fingerprints that no scholar ever showed you. First, the secret structure of Scripture. The Old Testament of the Bible as a 5 or 9 book mosaic consecrated for the Muses rather than written by Moses. Neither is there any reason why the number of these books should be confined to 5, but there is a reason why their number should be extended to 9 in honor of the 9 Muses who are believed to inspire such performances. Then, the fusion no one talks about. Ancient authors equating Moses with Bacchus, the river-born god of ecstasy and liberation.
And the whole group were represented as dancing around the sun, who personified as the god Bacchus was always represented as attended by the Muses, and by the metonymy of language acquired the name, precisely the same name, Moses, and was worshipped under that name.
From there we look more closely at nymphs and muses, the water spirits of prophecy whose cults shaped the earliest versions of Moses.
Muses are nymphs, and they're always associated with water. If you've ever played Legend of Zelda, you can see this is the play on the fairy fountains.
Then we discuss the forgotten builders.
Everywhere you see this maritime culture go, stemming from the Etruscans, they build tumuli, mounds. They're described as looking like breasts.
And finally, we put on the decoder ring, demonstrating the philological letter swaps that reveal Moses and whole mythic lineages as variations of the same root words.
The C functioned like a G in most of the ancient Italian cultures. You'll still see people say gannolis instead of cannolis. You see it with capicola, gabagool.
And you have to do this with your hands. It's part of how you pronounce it.
That was totally subconscious, by the way. That's how bad it is.
You can get part 2 of this show and the entire archive of epic Inner World episodes. And all you have to do is support the work of myself or Dylan. Access Dylan's work at greattide.substack.com or support me through interversepodcast.substack.com or patreon.com/interverse. For other ways to support the work Dylan and I do and benefit yourself in the process, check the links in the show notes for the Spirit World series of books, including audiobook versions that I narrate for you. You can also get a biofield tuning session with me from the Interverse Podcast website or explore my affiliate links for great holistic products. Thanks for joining us on the journey, and whenever you're ready to go deeper, we'll meet you in the inner world.